Welcome to this episode of Inside PTI. Today we're going to be talking about planter applied nitrogen, and at PTI Farm we're looking at a couple different ways on how we're able to do that. And you know, there's a lot of folks that dribble nitrogen, and I guess this has been done by farmers for a long period of time. It's an easy way to apply nitrogen, a very affordable way. But basically what we're doing is we're putting, I call them brake tubes, brake lines on the back end of a planter, and we're just spitting out liquid nitrogen, 32% or 28% nitrogen, right on top of the ground. You can see we've got a Fendt Momentum planter here. We've got these lines that go clear to the back end of the planter. And again, we're just dribbling on the back end right on top of the ground. That's what we call dribble applied nitrogen on the planter. We're applying either 28 or 32% UAN. And what is UAN? Well, UAN contains a mixture of dissolved urea with a heated solution of ammonium nitrate, and that's what makes this clear liquid fertilizer that's 28 or 32% nitrogen. 50% of the nitrogen comes from the urea solution, and 50% comes from the ammonium nitrate in the solution as well. So it's a 50-50 mix. Again, we're applying this mix right out the back end of the planter on top of the soil surface. We're not incorporating this nitrogen, we're leaving it right on top of the ground. This is what it looks like. Now, at the PTI Farm, we're a dual band. Everything we're doing is dual band, whether we're dribbling or whether we're putting it in the ground, sealing it. And this is what it looks like right after we make the planter pass with those two lines of fertilizer on each side of the planted row. What are advantages and disadvantages of dribbling out the back of a planter? Well, the advantages are it's super easy to install. It is very, very easy. Probably the other major advantage is it's affordable. It is very economical. It's cheap to put on a planter. What's the disadvantage? Well, this is the big one. It's nitrogen loss, it's volatilization, okay? And we'll talk about that a lot today. If we're gonna put nitrogen on top of the ground, we're gonna run the risk of losing that nitrogen due to volatilization. So volatilization is the loss of nitrogen through the conversion of ammonium to ammonia gas, which then can be released into the atmosphere. We really worry about volatilization when we're putting nitrogen on top of the soil surface in a dribble type application. So get this, this is how volatilization works. We come out with the planter, we make those dribble lines, okay? And that liquid UAN we're putting on contains ammonium. And once we apply the ammonium on the soil surface, a chemical reaction occurs that changes the ammonium to ammonia. And that ammonia is a gas form. And if we leave it on top of the soil surface, that gas form, that ammonia, will just be lost into the atmosphere. That's how this works. So we've got to protect this nitrogen. Okay, we can do this with stabilizers or we can incorporate it into the soil profile. But dribbling is just going to leave it right on top of the soil surface. And this is going to be something we're going to have to watch out for. We compare dribble type applications to some other ways. And one of the things we're using a lot of is Conceal applied nitrogen. And we're going to go back to that same Fendt Momentum planter on the gauge wheels is where we have Conceal. And again, this is dual band Conceal. We're going into the gauge wheels and we've got a knife on each side of the row. So now we're applying nitrogen not on top of the soil surface, but we're incorporating it about 1.5 inches deep. This is going to be 3 inches away from the seed trench. Again, 1.5 inches deep. And the advantages of this system is that it applies nitrogen in the soil, not on top of the ground, and eliminates that threat of volatilization. What are some disadvantages of Conceal? Well, probably the only one I can think of is compared to a dribble type system, it's definitely going to be more expensive. The placement of Conceal and dribble are exactly the same. We set it up to be identical placements. Just one's 1.5 inches deep, the other one's right on top of the ground. All right, so let's take a look at the yield differences between dribbling out the back of the planter versus incorporating it with Conceal. So this year, the major question was to dribble or not to dribble, and what we ended up with is we found out that we had a 12.2 bushel advantage for putting nitrogen into the soil, incorporating it, and protecting it from volatilization. In other words, if we dribbled out the back, we saw losses of 12.2 bushel per acre. Take that times the price of corn, and incorporating that nitrogen had advantages of over $36 an acre. Now, we weren't using any nitrogen stabilizers here. That would help, you know, to protect that nitrogen on top of the ground in the dribble situation. But here's where we did not use it, and we saw some pretty big advantages for getting that nitrogen covered up, sealed, and protected. So Today's Inside PTI agronomy tip of the day is we know nitrogen is nutrition that we need to maximize corn production. If nitrogen deficiency occurs, yield will go down, so we don't want to run into that situation. At-plant dribble situations of applying nitrogen are giving us a risk of exposure to volatilization, in other words, nitrogen loss. Now, I mentioned earlier, I think if you're going to do this dribbling of nitrogen, make sure that you're using a nitrogen stabilizer, especially if the short-term weather forecast looks for hot conditions, windy conditions, and that would kind of increase the chances of volatilization happening faster. And you've heard me mention this before. I think everything is about risk and reward. How much risk are you willing to take to get a high reward? And to me, when dribbling nitrogen out the back of the planter, there's too much risk there. We can get a quick reward in other ways, and that's with products like Conceal, making sure that nitrogen is protected. Again, remember, we saw losses of over 12 bushel to the acre, and that resulted into economic losses of over $36 an acre from leaving that nitrogen unprotected on the soil surface. Well, that's all the time we have for today. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, as always, feel free to reach out to any Precision Planting Premier dealer, or you can email us at InsidePTI@precisionplanting.com. We'll see you on the next episode of Inside PTI. Thanks for watching.